Hey there guys, how are you? So before The Force begins, the biggest question in the galaxy is Star Wars Episode 7 better than the prequels? Those are the kind of ideas I come up with at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now let's quickly break down the basic plot synopsis to this movie. And no worries, there's not going to be any spoilers in this review, so rest assured it's going to be okay, even though everyone's already seen the movie, but no spoilers. The character of Finn, a deserting stormtrooper with a heart of gold, decides to flee the First Order and eventually runs into the character of Rey. She's a scavenger on the desert planet of Jakku. And from there, the Force grows stronger and the fun begins. And this time around, the face of evil is the villainous Kylo Ren, who wants to fulfill the prophecy of Darth Vader. And oh my god, Han Solo's in this movie too. I hate giving the synopsis to a movie. It's Star Wars. You guys get it. It's not that complicated. Now let's get into the good stuff. So Star Wars The Force Awakens, Episode 7. Hype was in the air. Everybody was expecting this movie to be phenomenal, amazing, because after the universally disappointing prequel films, and some people like those movies, that's cool. I don't. Either way, in hindsight, I think it's fair to say that those movies could have used more Darth Maul and less Jar Jar. Let's get back to Episode 7. So everyone had high expectations, and everyone just wanted to see a good Star Wars film once again. That's all I wanted. I just wanted a movie that was on the same caliber as the original trilogy. Well, you know what? 15 minutes into this movie, I came to the conclusion this is going to be a good movie. Because within those first 15 minutes of Star Wars Episode 7, in one scene, here's everything that we get. We get introduced to new characters that are charismatic, intriguing, entertaining. We also get action-packed sequences that are well filmed, well executed. You can actually see what's going on. And we also get some character-driven dialogue scenes with human emotion. That's right, once again in a Star Wars film, actors are allowed to convey those things called human emotions towards one another. So you as a viewer, well, you kind of feel like you're watching real people talk about things that matter. Yeah, they're talking about more than just how sand feels. By the way, that'll be the last time I reference the prequels. That's it. Ugh. Elbow drop, get out of here. And in those first 15 minutes, it really sets the tone for what this new movie's going to be, and it blends everything together perfectly, and as a viewer, I took comfort in that. I was like, if the rest of the movie is like this, perfect. Now, very quickly, before we continue on with the rest of the review, I have to say this. I held this movie to a very, very high standard. If there was any negative aspect to this movie, I was going to take it and run with it. Because in my opinion, there was no excuse for this movie being bad. This movie had everything going for it. They took their time, it had a great budget, it had a great production company behind it, it had a good director attached to it, and there was absolutely no excuse to have another bad Star Wars movie, in my opinion. Now, the biggest positive I can say about this film is it's one of those movies where you cannot take a restroom break, because in Star Wars Episode 7, the plot progresses so aggressively and fast that if you miss something for about 5 minutes, you will miss some important information, something key, something important to the plot, story, or character development of someone in the movie. And that's kind of rare nowadays, because generally speaking, a lot of films are padded with a whole bunch of incoherent nothingness fluff. So suffice it to say, something significant is always happening in this movie. Now, I know by this point it almost sounds like I'm praising Star Wars Episode 7, and don't worry, I have some negatives. I didn't completely fanboy out on this movie, even though I have a Star Wars shirt and some giant Star Wars action figures back there. There's Darth Vader back there. I do have quite a few criticisms and negatives towards the movie, but we'll talk about those a little bit later. Now let's dive into depth and talk about some of the characters in Star Wars Episode 7. The two new main characters of the film are Rey and Finn, and I was pleasantly surprised by both of these actors and their characters, because I wasn't expecting to feel as connected to these characters as I did by the end of the movie. And actress Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey in this film, they couldn't have cast a better actress for this role. She by far gives the best performance out of anyone in this movie. Every scene she's in, she steals, and just some of the emotion she conveys throughout this movie. She has such a toughness and likability about her character, but when you look in her eyes, they're very vulnerable, and you just really buy into her, and by the end of the movie, you get very invested into her character, and you're kind of like just on the edge of your seat rooting for her. Kick some ass, Rey! I said that out loud. Everyone looked at me and said, "Shut up, asshole!" And as for actor John Boyega, he's a deserting stormtrooper, and it's really cool to see a humanized stormtrooper behind the mask. And I thought that was a really cool element of the movie. I will say this about his character and his acting performance. Within the first 15 minutes of the movie, this is essentially all John Boyega does. That's not much of an exaggeration because his character is very terrified and frightened of the First Order. He does not want to go back to being a stormtrooper. He wants to escape and get as far away as he can. But he does kind of overact within the first 15 minutes of meeting his character. But by the end of the movie, I love this guy. I really bought into him. I love the character arc that he goes through. And yeah, I really don't have any other complaints other than the first 15 minutes. He kind of just, it feels like he's overdoing it a little bit. And speaking of likable new characters in Star Wars, let's talk about Oscar Isaac, who plays Poe Dameron in this film. Who is he? Well, he's the best X-Wing pilot in the galaxy. And for me, in a lot of ways, his character came across like the more wholesome version of Han Solo. Now hear me out for a second. If he took Han Solo and took away his background of being a smuggler and all the shady stuff that he did, and just made him a really good guy with a really good background and kind of being a wise ass, but a hero at the same time, well, you kind of have Poe Dameron. Yeah, we'll go with that. But anyway, to sum up his character, you don't get a lot of him throughout the movie, but what you do get, you want to see more in future installments of Star Wars. Now let's get all those nostalgia vibes out and talk about Han Solo and Chewbacca returning once again. There was a point in this movie where I was looking up at the screen, looking at Han Solo in a new Star Wars film, and I'm thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did this happen? And then I got goosebumps all over my body. I was like, ugh. And I absolutely loved it. And the best thing about them being in this new movie is they didn't just shoehorn them in there for a cameo scene for 2 minutes. No, they go on the adventure with everybody. They guide these new characters through the galaxy, and you're just like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted to see from Han Solo and Chewbacca once again. You get everything you wanted. The fan service is there. And before we continue on to my favorite character of Star Wars Episode 7, first let's talk about nostalgia. This movie definitely gives you some nice throwbacks, some nice subtle references to past films, just subtle things. Nothing's really thrown in your face, just little visuals and mentions along the way, just enough to feel like you're in the same universe as the previous original trilogy, and I like things like that. I like when they're subtle about things and clever at the same time. Now, let's talk about the galaxy's newest badass villain, Kylo Ren. And by the way, on a quick side note, before this movie came out, there was a whole bunch of Kylo Ren action figures for sale, and nobody knew how this movie was going to play out, but everyone bought those things. And you know what? Rest assured, you did a good job, because Kylo Ren, if I was a kid and I bought action figures, what am I talking about? I'm 28 years old, I do. But yeah, if I bought Kylo Ren action figures, I would feel very good about those purchases, because Kylo Ren in this movie was everything I wanted, everything I needed, and even more. Now, when you have a movie like Star Wars, where it's basically good versus evil, well, yeah, the good guys are great in this film, but unless the evil version, that conflict that they have to go up against, is intriguing and interesting and you care about that as well, well, then the movie kind of falls flat. But no worries, Kylo Ren is a very intriguing villain, he's imposing, he's a badass, and he shares a lot of the same traits as another imposing badass villain from the Star Wars galaxy, Darth Vader. They have a lot of similarities, but I think Kylo Ren almost has more of a humanized side to him that, for me, you can kind of latch on to a little bit more. And I have to talk about this aspect of Kylo Ren, his voice. I love his voice. It's almost like Darth Vader meets Bane. Yeah, they had a baby and it popped out and it sounded like Kylo Ren. And I love it because the voice of Kylo Ren, when he has his mask on, is very imposing, and everything that he says throughout this movie, you just love listening to it because it's almost soothing and it's scary and it's threatening. And I wish I sounded like Kylo Ren. And one of my favorite things in this film regarding Kylo Ren, and no worries, this is not a spoiler whatsoever, for the sake of all of humanity, this is a 5-second scene that in no ways ruins any plot points and doesn't change anything in the story whatsoever. It's just one trait of the character of Kylo Ren. It's not a spoiler. There's a few scenes in this movie where Kylo Ren gets a little bit pissed off because things don't go his way. So what does he do? He takes out his triple lightsaber and just destroys the fucking rooms he's in. And you're just like, yeah, man, rage on that shit. And from a personal standpoint, that's why I can connect with this character of Kylo Ren. Because let's all be honest, how many times have you guys been playing Xbox 360 and you rage quit and you break your controller? We've all been there. So it's essentially just like Kylo Ren without the lightsaber. Okay, I have one more positive point to make about this film before we get nitty and gritty and dive down below into the negatives, and that is, This film is hilarious. The comedy in this movie was top notch. Everyone was laughing in the theater. Every time a joke was presented, it worked. And it blended in well with the movie. It didn't stand out as hokey or over the top or stupid. Okay, it's that time of the video where we talk about the negatives of Star Wars Episode 7. Don't get scared now. Now, throughout this movie, there's tons of humanized characters, a lot of prosthetics and CG elements, but the things I want to talk about are the two main CG characters in this movie, and they both stand out like sore thumbs. I don't know, maybe if the CG was a little bit off or they didn't present them in the best way possible, but I think it was a combination of a lot of different things not working right. And when they try to interject those fully CG characters in this movie with a lot of practical effects, it fell out of place. Now, the first fully CG character in this film I have an issue with was Supreme Leader Snoke, played by Andy Serkis. And I just want to say it felt like they wasted Andy Serkis with this because they didn't really do motion capture on his face, or at least it didn't look like it to me, because the CG version of Snoke in this film, he almost looks like Grendel from that 2007 Beowulf movie. Yeah, that's how it came across. And on top of that underwhelming CG of the character himself is kind of just the most generic bad guy ever. I want you to do bad things because bad things are what we do. Ha ha ha, we are the First Order. That was kind of like his character, and it was just like, I don't care about you. More Kylo Ren, please. And the second fully CG character I have an issue with in this film is the character of Maz Kanata, and she's only in the movie for about 5 minutes, and neither one of these characters take up a lot of screen time, but I had to find some criticisms with the movie. And the worst thing I got from the character of Maz Kanata, she almost felt like a character that could have been in the prequels films. And what do I mean by that? Well, she was very cartoony, very over the top. She felt like a cartoon character at times, like getting on the table with her big eyes opening up. It just, I don't know, it felt a little bit out of place with the tone that they were going for in this movie. And once again in this Star Wars film, the motto hasn't changed. The bad guys think whoever has the largest gun in the galaxy will win and take over everything. And you would think by this point they would have learned from past mistakes. It's like, come on bad guys, come up with a new plan. It's like the concept of a Death Star sounds really intriguing, but if you're going to build something like that, learn how to defend it. And I have one more nitpicky complaint about Star Wars Episode 7 because I gotta be critical of this film. I can't just completely geek out on it. I will say this, the first act of this film is by far the most well fleshed out act of the entire movie, because in Act 2 and Act 3, they're very good, very entertaining. They feel a little bit rushed over compared to the first act of the film. I enjoyed everything in this movie, but that's just my one last blah, blah, blah. Here are my final flicking thoughts on Star Wars Episode 7. J.J. Abrams directed a good Star Wars film. He did it, folks. We finally got the Star Wars sequel that we all wanted to see, and it's worthy of the title of Star Wars. Just about every single aspect of this film came together perfectly. The action sequences were well executed, well filmed. The comedy was the biggest surprise of the movie because it was actually funny and it worked well with the dramatic elements, and everything just blended together. Every character had their moment. There were some really intriguing scenes, very heartfelt scenes, and you cared about people in this movie. If you're a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, I don't know how you couldn't enjoy this new Star Wars film, or if you just like good movies that are fun and entertaining to watch. I don't know how you couldn't like this movie. So with everything said, I'm going to give Star Wars Episode 7 a solid A. May the Force be with you. Alright guys, so that's my take on Star Wars Episode 7, and here's my question to you, and let me know down below, what did you guys think about the movie? What did you like? What didn't you like? And what do you want to see happen in the next movie? So share your thoughts, your opinions down below. Say whatever you're thinking. I want to know. I read those comments. Put it down below. So as usual, guys, thanks for watching. And if you haven't already, please make sure you subscribe so I can see you next time. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out my last video. It's a good time. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.